Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Sade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have Dawn Ziegerer here with me to tell her divorce and dating after divorce story. Dawn is a coach for divorced women, and she helps them create love after divorce. So kind of in the same area here.
Yep.
But Dawn, welcome, and tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
Hello, my love, Sade. And it's so exciting that you live in Missouri. Am I allowed to say that? Do people know where you live?
No, they know where I live. Yeah,
okay. Fine. You live in Missouri, and I used to live like really close to where you are now. So, so Dawn Ziegerer, you pronounce it better than me. And I live in central Pennsylvania, and I came out here from Missouri for my ex-husband's job. And then I had another husband after that. Now I'm on husband number 3. And so that is why I help women find love after divorce, because I was you cuss on your podcast, don't you?
You are welcome to say whatever authentically comes out of you. This is an equal opportunity podcast.
Well, let's say my dating life was a clusterfuck after my second divorce. I was a mess. I had so much emotional baggage. I was just like, oh God, and I was repelling men. And so I had to figure out a way.
This was after the first divorce?
After the second.
After the second. Okay.
After the second. Yeah. Basically, I didn't apparently do enough work on myself between divorce number 1 and husband number 2.
Yeah.
All I did, but I was wrong.
Yeah. And you married the second husband was within 11 months of the first divorce. Is that right?
No, my first, so you are on the right track. My first divorce, I didn't get married for the second time, probably until, maybe 10 years later. It was a long time later, but from my first date to marriage was 11 months.
Was 11 months. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So why 10 years? Like, what was happening in those 10 years in between?
I was dating. So I went out with, some guys. Well, you probably know the story. You might have gone through this too, but you meet somebody and sometimes it's the first date and you're like, hell no, this is not happening again. Mm-hmm. Or some guys you date for 2 or 3 months. For some reason, I think 2 or 3 months is like the gold standard. You can figure out like, is this guy like, are we going to work out or not? So I was just dating different people. I dated one man for a year, and it's kind of funny because he kind of became instrumental in my life, and I can tell you how, but we dated for a year and he proposed, and that's what broke us up. Cause I was just like, I didn't think it would be a good marriage. And so I said no. Mm-hmm. So during that time, then I dated one guy who I just, fell madly in love with. And then I look back at how I acted during that time. I was so available. Anyway, it was awful. I look back now and I'm like, what the hell were you thinking? And then he ghosted me before there was a term for ghosting. And then I sobbed for 4 months and then had a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And so a lot happened between marriage 1 and marriage 2. Like I said, a heart attack, heartbreak, nice guys that I didn't really want to date, crappy guys that I knew I didn't want to date, a guy that I dated for a year, and a proposal that I didn't accept. So just a whole bunch of different stuff. Yeah.
So who were you in that period? I mean, it just sounds like there was a lot of chaos and a lot of like, who were you? How were you showing up that created all of that?
I think I was desperate. I think I felt like I had the quintessential nuclear family, right? It was mom and dad and 3 kids. And then, the first husband, I was like, my thoughts were, you're about as worthless as teats on a boar. Like, is that the right phrase? Yes. And so you're gone. So now like a chess game or like a puzzle, I need to replace your chess piece with another man that will help me create this nuclear family that I really, really, really want to have. And so that's, I think what I was doing is looking for, in fact, the guy that quote broke my heart and caused my heart attack. I don't think that anymore. I take full responsibility. Like I did everything to myself. Like I hung out with a guy who was obviously not interested in me for a really, really long time. But I think I was just desperate. I think I was just like, I can't be on my own. I need to be paired up. Like I need to create this. And it was like a search that didn't feel very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense because there's this, it's in the air, like, this is how things are supposed to look. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to have a husband. And in order for you to be complete as a woman, it needs to look like this. And you need to have your 2.5 children. And they all need to perfectly go through school and get good grades and go to college. And like, there's just like this standard, and I'm holding up air quotes, mm-hmm. of how we're supposed to show up and how we're supposed to be. And when we don't, or when something human happens in our lives, if we're not conscious, it can create just like this deep shame that causes the desperation to put the pieces back together exactly how they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And then also too, I think I just always like the women that listen to your podcast or mine is like, and I used to be almost, let's see, I don't want to say ashamed to admit this, but it's like, yes, I want a partner. I want to pair up, then I would, the back of my head, like, oh, well, you don't really need a man. Like it's really lame to say you want a man. I'm like, no, it is not. Like Hollywood is chock full of Hollywood bliss, right? And romantic love. And so now I will unabashedly admit it. Yes. It was always a goal in my life to have, that one person, like to have your person. And so I think I felt when I was married, I was extremely lonely, extremely lonely. So that divorce, like when that first divorce happened, of course it was a thing, but like, I don't even remember the day that he moved out. Like by that point, he was like a non-event in my life. And so, and for 20 years, I felt lonely. I felt partnerless. And so when it was time, when I felt like I was finally free, then I was just like, praise Jesus. Like the most wonderful man will just be waiting, near the cantaloupe at the grocery store or whatever,
Yeah.
That did not happen.
Yeah. So would you say you picked your second husband from that place of being desperate? Is that like what propelled you to choose him?
Probably, it's kind of funny because I have lots of thoughts about that because I'm thinking if I was that desperate, I would have just married whoever proposed and I didn't. Mm-hmm. So I think it, I was feeling like something was missing and I was really trying to put something there, but what was missing is probably just me having like such a full life that I needed just somebody to complement it rather than be the one that makes my life happy. Yeah. So I think when I met my second husband, I think I had been really just like, from like being on dating websites or whatever, just kind of like, oh, come on, isn't it finally going to happen? And so I think the, what I would call them dead end thoughts in my mind is like, oh, we've been on, dating sites for a couple of years. I'm like, you got to grab this guy because there's not enough other guys left. And like, just that feeling like,
scarcity.
Yeah, for sure. And then like now, of course I look back and I just kind of go like, oh my Lord, like there were so many red flags that I just willfully ignored. Like I just thought like, oh, this guy seems like he's it. And like, he literally, oh my gosh, on our second or third date, we went back to his house, pulled into the garage, and from floor to ceiling was empty cases of beer bottles, like floor to ceiling. Okay. So you think that somebody would, and so I thought I was handling it because a couple of weeks later I said, things are going really, really well, but I'm getting like a feeling that you really, really drink a lot. But then he had the great answer, like, oh yeah, it's just, I golf a lot and travel a lot, but I really want to drink less. And so of course I'm like dying to believe that.
Yeah.
And I think he really did. I think he really was sincere. I think people that have substance abuse disorders don't like having them either. And so I think he really thought that being in love with me would just turn things around, and it did not. But I think I willfully ignored. Now it's easy for me to see, 2020 hindsight, but my goal is to help my women have the 2020 hindsight now, like it's foresight.
Like ahead of time. Yeah. So were you thinking that you could help him overcome,
I thought
that problem? Because obviously he thought like, well, great, she's going to help me overcome this problem.
Yeah. And you know what though? I'm not sure if it was help. I just didn't understand addiction. I guess I kind of did because I used to be addicted to cigarettes like crazy. I would have put a cigarette in every orifice in my head and just gone, like I loved it. But yeah, I think I just thought, well, I see a problem and he's willing to work on it. And so I literally went onto the Googles and I typed in like, how much can you drink in a week? And the medical association, like online says, well, 14 drinks a week, not to exceed 2 per day. And so I thought, well, that seems reasonable. And then he said, that seems reasonable. And so, so it started off like that, like 2 adults just coming to some kind of, agreement. And then over the course of time though, but it probably wasn't really, now it's kind of foggy. I think things are, now I'm calling myself on my own shit. On our wedding reception, like I can distinctly remember at our wedding reception, kind of like giving him the side eye to see how much he was drinking.
Do you wonder exactly how divorced women just like you are meeting eligible men who want a real relationship and a commitment? They're doing it by dating with their core values. Your core values are the GPS that lead you to the partner you've been looking for. When you use your core values on dating apps, text messages, and at social events, you will easily connect with your true match partner without chasing, settling, or wasting time with non-committal men. I have taught exactly how to do this in the 2-hour Core Values Dating Blueprint course available on my website, shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY.com/dating. You will learn exactly how to identify your core values and use them on your dating profile, how to ask the right questions via text, and how to tell the right stories on dates so that you attract the right people and repel those who aren't right for you. If you're ready to meet your true match, hop over to shadecurry.com/dating or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode. Yeah, it was right there. Well, thank you for your honesty, because that is just so, it's hard to look back and say, yep, I did that.
Well, see, go ahead.
And you said something about when you went on Google, and I always tell my ladies, the minute you're about to Google his behavior,
something is wrong.
Is the moment that you should know something is wrong.
Exactly. It's like we know it, but we don't, yeah, it's kind of funny. But it's funny because at first, like what you said, like, owning up to that, it's true. Like, but that's where I get all of my power from now is like, I have been so averse to constructive criticism my entire life, or looking at myself and my actions, because I'm sure I was making it mean like, Dawn, you are just a stupid ass piece of shit. Like, I'm sure that's what I was making it mean. Like, how could you have done that? But it's like now when I look back and I'm like, yeah, the beer case is stacked, floor to ceiling, and, this and that and this and that. And I just think, so I always feel really bad, like for that day or a couple days, like really down on myself. But then I know I get to the place of feeling so liberated. I'm like, oh my God, if I had, like, I know what the problem is. So now I'm not going to do that again. And it doesn't mean that I'm bad or stupid. It means like, holy heck, I'm growing. Like I'm realizing, oh, this isn't working. So now I need to really be honest with myself and not ignore things that are glaring right in my face and not make excuses for other people so now it feels very powerful for me to look back. And like one of my recent, I guess, revelations was that, for those years, the 15 to 20 years I was married to my first husband, I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time and I did not enjoy it. But for the longest time, it was all because of him. He worked 70 hours a week. And then I'd have to I could give you an entire list of why it's his fault that I didn't work outside the home. Like, there was these 3 kids and they have to be taken care of and he doesn't do the laundry. Like it was just a whole thing. But then when I finally realized, like, girl, you were only trapping yourself. Like if you really wanted to work, you would have figured out a way to make it, you know what I mean? Like, so it's really liberating for me now to look back and also realize that the influence that I had on my kids during that time, like now I understand, like I was so resentful for staying home. that for sure came out through my actions to my children. So they were raised by a woman who was kind of resenting their existence. And so I've apologized to all of my kids. And trust me, that was a really shitty day. Like not the apology, but just looking at that and going like, oh my gosh, like, so I apologized to all of my kids. And like the day that I wrote the letter I was just crying all day long. Like, oh my God, I'm terrible. Like, whatever. But then apologizing felt so liberating and just like, oh my God, like I don't have to do it that way anymore. And now I know what I'm thinking, like, you're going off the track. Like you're like, this is going to lead you down the bad path.
It's bringing that, whatever that secret or that darkness is, into the light and letting disinfectant just clean it out and letting the wound heal. That's like really a part of healing. Yeah. And it can be hard, especially if we grew up in an environment that secrets and all kinds of, you got to put that perfect picture out there, which is really just a way of keeping all the darkness inside.
Yeah. I think for me, it was like, being raised in the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic anymore. I love Catholic people though. Anyway, that's another story.
Another podcast.
That's another podcast. Right. And I think just thinking like, well, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And a lot of it is internalized patriarchy for sure. Like I know that the reason I stayed home is because some part of me thought like, this is what moms have to do. This is what women have to do. Like, it's more important that, he's the breadwinner. And so, I had a lot of thoughts that were definitely not serving me at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you married husband number 2, and then 18 months later he left.
Right. That's another fun thing too. It's like, I honestly, like right when it happened, I was like, wait a second, wait a minute, hold the presses, stop the presses. Yeah. Like, wait, you are, I don't feel any negative feelings for him now, but at the time I was thinking, you're a very mean alcoholic who's very insecure and jealous. And if I wrote you down on a piece of paper, people would assume that I left him, but no.
Right.
He left me. And I'm just like, what in the actual hell? And so that is the work that I had to do. But like he did this, this, and this, and I stayed for all of it. And I would have told you that like, I am woman, hear me roar. I'm a very powerful feminist. Well, apparently not. I put up with a lot of stuff that I would never be around anymore.
Yeah. And so I know when we talked earlier, you said, you made him the villain in that story for a really long time. But now you see like where you had your part in it.
Yes. And so for example, for the longest time, like I remember one time I was getting coached and my coach said to me, I said something about like having PTSD, and the ladies that I coached know that I had PTSD. And she's like, well, why do you tell them? And she wasn't saying it meaning you shouldn't tell them. She was just inquiring, like, why are you telling them that? And I said, so that they know that I've been there with them. And I know what it's like. And I lost my house and he left me on the day that I quit my job. And I lost my house. I lost all of my stuff. Like I'm with you. And she's just like, as long as you think you were traumatized, you were. And then we got off the call and I was pissed. I was like, are you kidding me? You're blaming the victim. I can show you in my file. It says PTSD. I had to go to the counselor twice a week, for a long time because I was completely falling apart. And what do you mean? Like, if I think I'm traumatized, I'm traumatized. Like it says it right here in black and white. And so for about a day, I was just like, I was definitely in a snit and I was mad at her. And then the next day I started thinking like, wait a minute, like I had a heart attack and I also had open heart surgery, but on any given day, you can see me hiking a mountain or doing some really hard boot camp class at the gym. And I'm like, it's in my file, heart disease. I've already outlived my father. Like I don't sit around going like, oh, I've got heart disease. I can't do anything for me. No, I'm just at boot camp class. Yeah. So if I think I'm debilitated because of my heart, then I'm freaking debilitated. And I was doing the exact same thing with my PTSD. And then I finally started going like, oh, I have to release all of this. So that's when I started to take ownership of like, this happened and I had no conviction. And so rather than leaving or telling him to leave, I would just argue. And I thought that I was being the strong woman by standing up for myself and arguing. But that is like a path to hell. Like, honestly, like, think of it this way. If my husband came into the kitchen and took a dump in the middle of the kitchen floor, like, that would never happen again. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't argue and go, well, it might not be sanitary and like it might hurt the floor. It's like, no, you're not taking a dump in the middle of the kitchen.
You wouldn't negotiate that. There would be no negotiation.
Exactly.
Like,
but there were things, right. But so, for example, when I mentioned my, the guy that I dated for a year that proposed was instrumental in my life. My second husband was obsessed with this man. So this man and I were Facebook friends, and I knew it was completely fine because there was nothing going on. Like, he asked me to marry him. I said no. Like, so we could, we're Facebook friends. But he would kept questioning me. He would stalk me on Facebook and he would say, oh, I saw you liked his post. And now I understand. And my therapist tried to tell me at the time, like, the only response was, yeah, it was funny. But I didn't, well, honey, I didn't marry him. I married you. Like, it was this, and so I needed to nip it in the bud and go, yeah, it was funny. Like, don't stalk me on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then if you continue doing it, like now I know there's no way in God's green earth that I would ever date or marry a man that didn't trust me when I said, I have nothing for him. Like, it was a guy that I'd had an affair with. That's different. I didn't have an affair with him. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was no situation where it would be, if I'm with a man that doesn't believe what I say, I am not going to stay with that man. So the man that I'm married to now, this is so funny, where my second husband was obsessed with this guy. Like, it's a really long story. And I could give you a lot of examples that are like crazy town. Like, he would take a picture with this guy's name in it and send me the picture. Like, here, you can share this with your boyfriend. And I was like, my husband now actually works out with him every weekend.
Wow.
So it's like, I'm like, wait, I had a second husband who was so jealous and obsessed with this guy that had nothing to do with my life. And now my husband saw a video that he does sword practice, like whatever.
Like martial arts.
Yeah. Martial art, like with swords. And so I was sitting on the couch next to my hubby and I was like, oh, look, like, he's doing this thing. And he's like, oh, do you think he'd let me do it with him? And I'm like, sure. And so now they work. Like, I never see my ex-boyfriend, but my husband sees him every week, and yeah. And like, that's the gold standard for me, is like a person that trusts me and he's not jealous. And when I say something, I'm not lying. And, yeah. So I'm with a great guy. Yeah.
I really love your analogy of having had a heart attack and recovering from that. Like, you had a heart attack, you went to the hospital, you had open heart surgery, you recovered, you did whatever physical therapy or whatever the doctor prescribed to heal from that. And then you moved on to build something new, kickboxing and hiking, and everything you're doing now. And it's just such the perfect analogy for divorce, right? Where, a lot of divorces are traumatizing. There is complex PTSD that can come out of that. There is even childhood trauma that can like get triggered in the moment of, like, I know my childhood trauma got triggered by the divorce because I had packed it away nicely in a little box and was sitting on the shelf. And then when the divorce happened, I was dealing
Pandora's box. Yeah.
I was dealing with the divorce trauma and my childhood trauma that got triggered so badly. So it was a really crazy time, except I knew all I had to do was heal. It was like, okay, we now have this thing that has happened. You go to the doctor.
Right.
Right. So I did all the things, therapy, 12 steps, coaching. I still do it. I'm still working through some of those things.
Oh yeah, me too.
But it's like, no, but it doesn't have to stop me from finding new love. It doesn't have to stop me from building a business or finding a new job or creating a new career or feeling good or changing the way I parent or changing the way I experience the world. Like, all of that is available on the other side of healing versus carrying the pain, like you said.
Oh, like, God. Yeah.
Continuously into the future.
Yeah. Well, you've probably heard that phrase, hugging a cactus. It's like, yes, I had my cactus. Like, I'm not letting go. It's like, and some people just love hugging that cactus for a really, really long time. Or even like,
they think they don't have a choice. Like, we have a choice.
Like, you can it's kind of like when I thought I was trapped as a stay-at-home mom, I wasn't trapped. Like, the only person holding the key was me. Like, I'm the one that kept myself there. But yeah, but it's kind of funny because with my heart attack, I healed from two different heart things. So my heart attack was actually 15 years ago. I was only 42 at the time.
Wow.
And so I recovered from the heart attack, and that happened while I was in grad school. So that was fun. And then I had the open heart surgery 3 years ago. So they were basically like 12 years apart. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. I had to heal from both, but I never ever thought that I couldn't. I was just like, yeah, this is a bump in the road. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Same thing with divorce, ladies.
Yeah.
Divorce is just a bump in the road.
Right.
It really is. I love that you brought that up. So let's talk about Mr. Right and how you met. You said when you started dating after, your second divorce, you had a lot of anxiety around dating.
Yeah. So I took about a year to land. So he left me in December of 14. So basically all of 2015, I cried. I did a lot of crying. I lost about 10 pounds, which I couldn't really afford to lose. Did some divorce support groups, got therapy. And then when I felt like, okay, I'm not quite the train wreck that I had been, I'm going to go on some dating sites. So I dated, some guys here and there. But I was proud of myself because there was one guy that I dated. He was a state trooper and he was nice enough, but he was obsessed. I mean, all he really wanted to do was work and work overtime. And so like he would, it'd be Friday and he'd contact me that morning. Hey, you going to go out tonight? And like an idiot, I went. But one of those times I told him, I said, if you ever want to date me, like we need to plan this stuff 3 or 4 days in advance because I have a life. Right. So there were some guys. So anyway, so we broke up. So yeah, I dated, some guys, and one of the guys that I dated, I saw his profile on Match and I was like, oh, angels are singing. He was a professor, my age, fit, blah, 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 blah. And we dated for a couple of months. And then I realized like this guy is just consumed with anger. So we broke up. So by that time I had gotten like my Match.com feet firmly planted underneath me. Like I'd been on Match on and off for 10 years. And I used to do this thing. My husband calls it a gestalt. Like I would read a man's bio, then I would just fill in everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And so so even like
brain loves stories. It loves to fill in the gaps.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. And of course you're going to do it according to your own mental models. Right. And so, so this guy that I, dated that I was like, oh, angels are singing, like just reading his bio and looking at the picture of him standing there with his 10-speed bike or whatever it was, like, it's like, oh, he's a good father and he's a this and he's a that. And like, blah, 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 blah. And I did that for so long. And then I would go on a first date and I would say like, I'd lose my Woody really quick. Like I have it so built up in my head. And then we would meet and I was like, wah, wah. And so, anyway.
Like your profile was better. I think I'm going to date your profile.
Exactly. Or, what happens, you'd see the profile, then you'd have like some funny banter back and forth on emails or texts. And you're like really, really excited, which is, I always tell people like, go on the date sooner, unless the person is a person you would never date, like meet sooner rather than later. And so anyway, so by the time I met my hubby, I had already, gotten to the point where I'm just like, I need to have a life and I will go on these dates and I'm not going to get like super excited or super, like, I'm going to be, for lack of a better term, like neutral. You know what I mean? Like, because in the beginning I was putting so much, like they were so important, like it has to go well. Like I was putting so much weight and drama on like the first date. And then if I, like it was like, a blow,
like,
and I'm like,
heartbreak. It's like you created the heartbreak because you created the unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, completely. And I think part of it too is because I think I'm a catch. And so I extrapolate the traits about myself that I like, and I just project them onto this person who also has all of these things that are wonderful. But anyway, so by the time I met my hubby, who I call Jimmy Jailbait because he's 8 years younger than me. Like I'm not quite 58 and he's not quite 50. So, which is kind of funny. But anyway, so before I met him, I just had more of a non-dramatic, neutral mindset. Like I wasn't excited about meeting him. I wasn't like not looking forward to it. I was just kind of like, yeah, we'll wait and see. And then our first date lasted 4 or 5 hours. and I peed myself on the date, which is a whole other story. In fact, I told the story publicly. Like basically I didn't get up to pee for 5 hours. And when I stood up, my poor bladder just went, and I was like, ah, it's a very funny story. So yeah, I peed myself on our first date, and yeah, the rest is history. But it's been the rest is history.
How did you guys meet? Well, I peed myself on the first date.
Yeah.
He decided to marry me.
To marry anyway. But one thing that we say, we don't say it as much now, but like a couple of years ago, we would say like, oh my God, like, I'm so glad we stuck it out, because it was rough. Like the first, like a year and a half of our relationship, I was a mess. But I knew it was my mess, or I knew it was both of our mess, because he didn't come to me, like, he's divorced. He didn't come to me from his first marriage, like, white as the virgin snow. You know what I mean? Like, he had his own stuff that he had in his life, and I had mine. And then you're trying to combine them together. And I was getting triggered constantly, or I was, he would say something or do something, and my brain would just go, do you want me to tell you one of them? It's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Do you ever talk about sexy stuff on this podcast?
Yes.
Not
a lot. Sex hasn't been my thing. I'm not like trained, but I have had a couple of podcast guests who are sex coaches.
Oh, okay.
On the podcast. So yes.
So I won't scare anyone. Well, this is just like a thing that I'll tell you about me, that it's going to sound funny. It was not funny at the time at all. It was awful. And so when he and I first started dating, the Wonder Woman movie had just come out. And I just remember, like, the trailers would come on TV or whatever, and I would feel sick. I felt fear and anxiety and worry. And then one day, by this point in our relationship, I already knew that I'm going to tell him anything that I want, no matter how embarrassing it is. And I'm going to ask him any question. And if he doesn't answer it, then I won't date him. Like, by then I was like, marriage number 2 is never happening again. And so if I ask you, I don't care how embarrassing the question is, if you won't answer me, goodbye. So I already knew at that point in our relationship that I could tell him whatever. And he knew that I had PTSD. And so I said, honey, I can't go with you to see the Wonder Woman movie, and I really don't want you to see it. And he's like, why? And I said, because if we go into the theater, I'm going to feel like an ugly piece of shit, and you'll be sitting in the chair looking at Gal Gadot in her, basically a bustier. Like, the Wonder Woman costume is very objectifying, right? She's basically wearing thigh highs and a bustier. And I said, so you're going to be checking her out, and I'll just be kind of like, who's Dawn? Like the chopped liver sitting in the seat next to you. And then we're going to get home, and then you're going to take a shower, and you're going to jerk off thinking of her. That's why I can't go. And it was horrible.
Like, I see the whole movie. I know exactly what's going to happen when you get home.
Yep. And I'm like, and God bless him. He was just like, oh gosh, like, thank you for telling me. He's like, and then he would say, like, I think you are absolutely beautiful. Like, I don't anticipate that happening. Like, I won't be doing that. Yeah. I won't be thinking of her in the shower or whatever. He's like, but we don't have to see it. And we didn't see it. Like,
you felt safe enough to tell him about your insecurities.
Oh yeah. And like, stuff like that happened all the time. Like, there's the yoga pants, and there's a whole bunch of things that he would just say something innocent. And my mind went to the darkest place, and it was so scary because I'd been cheated on before, and it was a surprise. And so my brain was just like, you're not safe. Men are not safe, and they are lying, cheating pieces of crap. And so I thought if I could control and know everything that was happening, then I would be safe. Like, I used to have a big, I'm still definitely not okay with porn. Like, I don't want to be married to you if you're going to use porn. That's just my thing. And I'm convicted about it.
There's a part of my program that I always, like, a lot of my clients don't realize that they need this piece of it. I call it nurturing intimacy, because especially if you're coming from divorce or a dysfunctional childhood, you don't actually know what a healthy relationship feels like. So you're coming in having done all the work to choose a healthy person, but you don't realize that you're bringing in this nervous system that is uncomfortable with a healthy environment, that thinks a healthy environment is unfamiliar and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really does take some coaching and some changing one's mindset to settle into that healthy relationship. Because like you said, you were trying to control an alcoholic before. And of course, now I'm in this healthy relationship. Of course, I need to control something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That part of you didn't know what its job was anymore.
Yeah. Right.
And you needed time to be able to say, oh, you don't have to do that anymore.
Right. Because my brain was just coming up like, trying to keep me safe. And so it's kind of funny because like I said, I'm a no go with porn, but I used to have like these horrible, because to me it's cheating. And I told my husband, well, I won't tell you what I told him because it's kind of gross, but basically if things are happening, it's with me, not with some woman on a computer screen or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I get it. Although I know some women don't think the way I do, but I'm very happy and convicted to think that way myself. But I used to get myself into like a tizzy, like where I literally felt nauseous, where I was just like, oh my God, like if he goes out of town for a week, like, oh my God, like, how do I make sure he's not lying and using, like, I would just make myself a mess. And then I realized like, Dawn, it's like, if you get in your car and drive to the grocery store, he knows you're going to be gone for an hour. If he's going to use it, he's going to use it. He doesn't have to go to Seattle. Like it can happen even while you're probably in the same house. You know what I mean? Like, so you either trust him or you don't. You know what I mean?
100%, yeah.
But it took me a long time.
And if you don't trust him, then why are you with him?
Right.
Really asking, okay, do I trust? Do I not trust? What are my reasons? What am I seeing that's making, because there are times when you shouldn't trust. Like if a person does give you reason not to trust, you can decide not to trust.
Yes.
But make you realizing that power is in your hands to choose.
And for the longest time, I just thought, well, like my thought was, well, yeah, you just trust people. Like that's just the way it is. You just trust people. And so it was a big thing for me to realize like, no, people, like it's okay that certain people have to earn your trust where you don't, because like I would be like Pollyanna, just like jumping right in, like la 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 la. Yeah. And I realized that's not really serving me very well. So
yeah. And it sounds like at the end, kind of like a version of this thought that I can handle whatever comes was there. Like, okay.
Yeah. And then, and even in my marriage now, like I still have to do constant work, and I know that I'm going to have to forever. But like, for example, there are some things that I have done that people would think were very provocative, but it was because I would have the same problem for, 4 or 5 years. Like recently it was, with the stepkids and chores. And it's like, it's been this ongoing battle for literally for 4.5 or 5 years. And then finally I got to the point, it's kind of a long story. I'll give you the condensed version, but, I just didn't like being there at the house on certain weekends when they were there because they were messy. Like I hated being in the kitchen, leaving it clean and then coming back an hour later and there's, dishes or food or whatever. Like I was like, no, and it's been happening for a long time. Or one of them does their chores, but they do like a half-assed job. You know what I mean? Like they, whatever. So it was just me and the hubby arguing all the time about all the chores things. And so one day I just said like, honey, and this is the important part, is the thought behind it, is I said, honey, I really, really love you and the kids, but I don't like being here when it's messy. So I'm leaving for the weekend. And he was like, what? Like it took me a long time because I realized it's kind of like the taking a dump in the middle of the kitchen floor. It's like the reason why we kept fighting about it is because we kept fighting about it. Yeah. Like
you hadn't made a decision about what you were going to do about it.
And so I made the decision, like, I'm not going to be here if it's a mess. Like, I love you guys. And it's kind of funny because now, like, it's only been maybe 6 weeks since that happened. Like since I left for the weekend, like now everything is done when they leave. So, but I had to do a lot of mindset work because I think part of it was like, well, I'm going to do things for you that I don't want to do. So I expect you to do this for me. And I'm like, God, that is like the path to hell in relationships. It's like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to, because now you owe me. Like so many of us operate under that principle. Like, well, I take you to school and I helped you, whatever. And it's like, well, if you don't want to do it, then you shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
Like,
it comes
because
back
it's
to
gonna,
choice to really, I love to teach my clients to like own their life, own their space, own their time, own their experience,
Mhm.
and believe that it's all within their control, not what other people do, but what they do and what they choose to experience. And then
Mhm.
from that belief, start to see where they're not exercising their own power or their own decision making or their own choices.
Right. Because I think a lot of times we just think like, I know this will sound really silly too, but just within like the last month, like I didn't realize that I had the thought, like when if the stepkids, so one of my daughters lives with us, but the other two of my kids are grown, and the stepkids come over like 3 nights a week, or I should say extra kids. I hate the word stepkids. And so the extra kids come over a couple nights a week. And so they come over on Tuesday, and I realized that every Tuesday I was kind of like going like I got to cook dinner. It's part of my brain was just not even questioning the idea that, well, I have to cook dinner. Like we need to have certain kind of food here when they get here. And I just had to bust that one open. And I was like, I don't have to cook.
You
Like
don't have to do anything.
like they're 15 and 17 and my daughter's 28. It's like, they're not 4 years old. Like if I don't cook on Tuesdays, then they'll just know like we need to cook or we're going to eat a peanut butter sandwich. It's just like, so I have so many thoughts in my head that I still have to work on because I was doing things that I don't want to do. Like if I'm cooking and I don't really want to cook, then I'm going to be super pissy when you don't do the dishes. Like, well, I just cooked for you, so you need to. It's just like, how about if I just do what I want and then they do what they want, and it has, yeah.
Right. And then you just make time to love each other. Just make time for love. Let's just love and enjoy each other's company.
Exactly.
Instead of all having to do things, needing to do things, must do things, all of that thinking. So that's really powerful. Yeah, that's the second half of the journey. That's like understanding what it looks like to really be healthy once you have people in your life that are truly healthy. That's so awesome. I really did want to just kind of call out the fact that like we were talking about how you could handle things, like a lot, what you've been through, those 2 divorces before meeting, the person who was right for you and was healthy, is a lot of what divorced women are afraid of. Like none of us wants that second divorce. Like it's like, oh, I don't want a second divorce. This is terrible. And for some women, the thought that could happen stops them from opening up to love at all.
That's true. And also too, and this is funny. I think the reason why I stayed as long as I did is because I was just like, oh, no. You're not going to be the one that gets divorced twice. Like I was just like, to me, that was such a big deal. And when you think things are a big deal, then you really avoid them. And so women need to understand, like, guess what? Like, I don't know, like when you're building an airplane, like, you have to do this, and take test flights and like, whatever. It's just like, but you still do them. It's, I don't even know if that made sense, but what I mean is
like you don't not do something because there's a risk,
right?
You mitigate risk.
Yeah. And
like there is a risk. How am I going to mitigate and do my best to prevent that risk from happening? But in life, everything is a risk.
Right. And also too, it's just like, and if I keep telling myself, oh my God, getting divorced twice is such a big deal. It's such a big deal. Like it's people that think it's not a big deal. I'll do what I need to do. They're the ones that have the successful marriages and relationships is because they already know, like, oh, there's certain things that are a yes and certain things are a no. And they're not like, you do what you need to do to get where you're going. And and so I didn't see like to get to, because I was in a really crappy marriage and I didn't see like, hey, the goal is to have a wonderful marriage. And if I want that, the action here is to get divorced. Like my brain wouldn't even let me see that. Like, oh, it's such a big deal. But if I just think, no, it's not a big deal. It's what I have to do. Then I'll ultimately get to the place that I want to go. But honestly, as I think to myself, like, how long would I have stayed? Like if he didn't leave, like I probably would have had my dead end thoughts like for a really, really long time. So yeah. So him leaving was awful, but now I look back and I'm like, yeah, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
It was a gift to you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh,
I know it's going to help some people because there are some people who've been through what you've been through, and you sharing your thoughts and your path to redirecting and getting back up and like, nope, this isn't the end.
Right.
So much more, and changing your thoughts. I think that's so helpful and so inspiring. Could you please remind the listeners what you do, and also just tell us where we can find you on the internet if anyone wants to follow you or reach out to you, your website, your social media handles.
Sure. So on podcasting, I guess all over the podcasting, it's just called Love After Divorce. And then my website is therebuildingcoach.com. And so like a lot of coaches, I do a complimentary consult. Mine lasts for about an hour. And then I make a diagnosis about like what is standing in the way between you and where you want to go. So look at a diagnosis. Yeah. And they can listen, like I said, listen to my podcast to see if they like my style, because I'm very blunt and I'm very cussy. And so if they don't like that, they may be like, oh my God, this woman's crazy. We're not listening to her. But one last thing that I'll leave you with is so it's for women that are looking for love after a divorce or a breakup. And it could be like, if it's woman to woman, man, I don't care, like whatever gender orientation. I always want to get this right. I think it's gender orientation and sexual preference. I think it doesn't matter to me. But the first step in finding love after divorce is to identify the things that you're doing to repel good partners. And like, I'm having so much fun doing podcasts about that. Like, I'm like, you want to become the one that's so attractive, people are dying to marry you. And so the reverse of that is, if you're not that means that you're doing something now that you might not be aware of, that you're saying or doing that is actually repelling the good ones, which is going to cause you to end up with the same person you were with last time, which is what happened to me. Like, I think I didn't do the work that I needed to do. And if I did, I wouldn't have attracted husband number 2.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much again.
Oh yeah. And thank you. I love being on the show. I love
Absolutely. This was so fun. This was so fun. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. But listeners, thank you so much for your time and attention today. Follow Dawn on the internet, reach out to her on her website. All of her links will be in the show notes on this episode. Thank you for spending time with us today, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to sadecurry.com to get started. That's SADECURRY.com. I'll see you inside.